I'm Dane Rose, and I wanted to begin this journey by voicing what I believe to be important values and shared goals. And it's important to consider whether or not you share these goals at the beginning, because much of the journey and following conclusions and things will not make any sense if you don't share the goals. And if you don't share the goals, it's also valuable to articulate for yourself what goals you believe, what values and goals you believe would result in a better reality. Because ultimately all of us are looking for the best possible outcome possible within a circumstance. And so values and goals are generally probability fields or suggestions that take us in that direction. And the first value and goal is that nonprofits operate in public interest, consistent with their mission. And the framework for that value and that goal is that legally, nonprofits receive a tax benefit on the basis of not operating on personal interest, but on operating in the interest of the public, that they create a charter, an organization with a statement. We would like to serve the public in this way, and our commitment is to put public interest first ahead of profit and personal agendas, and therefore we request that we not pay tax on roads and schools and various things like that, because we will put the public first. The second is that professionals, and particularly professionals in healing or medical fields, which are so vital to our species' health and well-being, first, avoid at all costs doing harm. That if you hire a plumber, their number one responsibility is not to flood the whole house with a faulty solder joint or something of that nature. And secondly, put their clients' healing as their highest priority. And I'm sure that we can all agree that the world is better off when that protocol is followed, and that it degrades a profession when the alternative, when you pay a professional money and end up in a worse location or a worse position. You hire the plumber to fix a dripping faucet, and maybe they do or don't fix the leak, but in the process the whole house floods, is not good for the plumbing profession, certainly, if that's the reputation that goes around. So it's not in the plumber's interest, it's not in the profession's interest, it's not in the client's interest. The third thing is that accurate data is a goal because it leads to a successful map of reality. Meaning we all rely on maps, whether it's a book or Google Maps, to get where we're going. And for the map to be useful, at the end of following the map, we need to end up in the desired destination. And this is only possible when the map is framed or composed using successful data, using accurate data. So a data-based map which leads to a more successful reality, and that this must be embraced with by all, with the goal of creating success. Data as a continual process, and good map services are always updating the areas that they have a blind spot or there's some little anomaly. And this is a really important part, because in the worst case scenario, you don't know where you're going. And so you look to a map service, and the map service takes you in the exact opposite direction to where you want to go with confidence, meaning that you confidently drive off in the wrong direction because the map was built on inaccurate data. And when there's a lot of confidence in a faulty map, you may have doubts, you may have inner conflicts, but you follow the map. Google must know must know the lay of the land more than you do, and you actually end up confidently in the exact place that you didn't want to go and far from the desired destination. The fourth thing, and it's consistent with data, is if you think about thought or truth or reality, there's no thought that you can think, and thus nothing you can be conscious of without language. So if you try and compose something that you're aware of without referencing language in any way, whether it's a sensation, how does one become conscious of a sensation? One locates it in a named part of the body. Is it in the hand? The hand is a word. It's not really the word, but the word is how we reference the consciousness. And that's why it doesn't matter whether you say the word in Thai or in Tagalog or in English or Russian. The word is the cue that tells you where the consciousness is located. And so it's very difficult to become conscious of something without the concept, without the paradigm, without the word and language. And so we must name something to be conscious of it. And in order to respect something, we have to be conscious of it. We have to see it. And our form of consciousness is through language. When we do not name something, when it is as a result unconscious, one dishonors inevitably that which is unnamed, or at least there's a strong possibility of doing so. If I don't see you and don't name you as a body and a person that has to be attuned to as I'm walking, and I bump into you, what we are unconscious of, that which doesn't have a name, is something we repeatedly bump into, and in doing so dishonor and violate to some extent. The naming of the terrain in which we are operating is very important to success. The fifth is that ethics is the feedback and impact-based science of success in a given field, and is sacred, a form of self-love, and must be studied by any leaders in that field. In other words, in order to be a leader in a given terrain, one must understand the ethics. And what ethics are in their most basic sense is an awareness of the probability field. For example, the ethics of flying a 747 include 6 years of training, include going through a checklist, a flight checklist at each point prior to taking off. And the reason for this is that this practice, this protocol of ethics, has resulted in, despite the incredible fragility, it's a phenomenal accomplishment to take hundreds of tons of human beings and materials and ascend into the air, and then even more of an accomplishment to gracefully land that, rather than crashing, as something that you couldn't do without a very good database map. That ethics is at its core the study of an impact-based protocol of success, and that that ethics and best practices correlate and correspond based on the best data available. They're always changing. The ethics of a given field evolve as there is new data, which is why data is so important, and it's why ethics is a feedback-based protocol of continuing to gather and learn the path of behavior that most consistently delivers the desired results. And to be a leader in a given field is to embody the practices that lead to a better result. 6. Trust equals growth. It is in many ways innate to all aspects of human learning. In order to have going to school, any school, be an intelligent choice, one must have the belief based on trust that one will learn something. In order to open into a relationship and be vulnerable, we must have the trust that the other person, the other parties have your best interest at heart. Otherwise, it makes no sense to engage with another human being, with a school, with an organization, because if you believe and trust that you will be harmed as a result of the interaction, you will not interact. And to grow as human beings and a species, trust based on trustworthiness is one of the most sacred underpinnings of any framework for interaction. And as such, it is sacred. The behavior that increases trustworthiness, that increases trust, which tends to be ethical behavior, behavior that is in integrity with best practices, strengthens the species, strengthens our relationships, and behavior that weakens trust, that violates ethics, and thus increases the odds that pain will be the result of the interaction rather than well-being, destroys the framework of an evolving species. 7. Healing, recovery, education, and the resulting growth is in our species' interest. And that which we deify or make sacred are generally those things which correspond to our human needs: survival, the security of that survival, a sense of love and belonging, a sense of self-esteem, self-actualization, the development of our innate talents and abilities, the support in bringing those talents and abilities to bless those around us, to bring them out into the world. The sense of ultimately, not only moving beyond the sense of self to care about others, but also to have a sense of transcendence, transcending the limited sense of self, that these are human needs. And in order to meet these needs, not preferences, but core drives within every human being, we need to heal that which is out of alignment. We need to recover that which is lost and missing, to draw out, to educate, to draw out the best in ourselves, and that we grow as individuals, but synergistically, that our species evolves based on the level of healing, growth, and education in each one of us, which makes these fields particularly important. 8. That our shadow, dark and light, must become integrated and conscious to reach our potential as individuals and the species. And the shadow is one of the examples in language of something that's very difficult to work with if you don't have language and paradigms to understand it. And so very basically, as we come into the world, into a given culture, there are certain parts of us as boys and girls, as men and women, that are embraced, that are acknowledged, that are respected, that are seen and educated and developed. And then there are other parts of us that are denied. Nobody talks about them, and it is taboo to talk about them. And some of these are incredibly beautiful parts, but they don't fit within the limited paradigm of the given cult or culture of which we're a part. And so there are incredibly transcendent and magnificent parts of ourselves and of our species that do not get bandwidth within the current time-space reality within our culture. And there are also very ugly parts, very pain-based and suppressed and difficult and unresolved parts within us, violence, hateful, and traumatized parts, which also, in a shadow-averse culture, get suppressed and denied. And that in order to reach our full potential as individuals and as a species, we must continually move in the direction of naming, of becoming conscious of, and of integrating, finding the healthy relationship with all of our feelings, with the full range of our imagination, with our abilities. And in doing so, as we become conscious of and embrace more of our shadow, the cult does the dividing between what is considered light and dark. One cult might say that anger is a positive quality. Another cult may say that anger is a negative quality. But if anger is, for example, suppressed and denied and made into a taboo topic, it doesn't disappear as part of the ecology of our psyche. Rather, it becomes unconscious because it's not talked about, because it's suppressed, because it's denied. It becomes unconscious. It still affects us, but in an unconscious way, in a dishonoring way. In other words, that which we deny and suppress and put into unconsciousness, we cannot simultaneously embrace and respect. When we dishonor a part of ourselves, we form a relationship of opposition with a part of ourselves, which means that that part of ourselves still has impact on ourselves and on the rest of the world. It's just not a conscious impact. It's not an honoring impact. When we, for example, fail to love the unloved, the betrayed, the abandoned inner child, and hate it and suppress it and push it down, the child is neither positive or negative. As we treat it as an enemy, its well-being deteriorates. Its feelings of desperation and hopelessness increase. As a denied and repressed part of the cultural psyche, it comes up and sabotages the reality. When we attack the inner child is still there. It just overrides and barges into our reality with the same ignorance and fear that we use to suppress it. And so to maximize an elegant reality, we must continually look to outside of the periphery of our cult-sanctioned sense of self to become aware of the other and our relationship with that other so that we can honor it, so that we can have a more successful relationship. That shared ownership and responsibility, the ability and willingness to respond, rather than scapegoating and disowning, leads to more empowerment and change. In other words, when pain presents itself in any face in our reality, on the news, etc., the more that we can own and understand that this is a part of our psyche, that the reality that we create as a species is in many ways predicated by the amount that we are conscious. When we are fully conscious of our own light and dark shadow and integrated as individuals, for example, we create a much more positive reality around us, and that begins to reflect itself in our relationships and in the larger world. And when we continually take what is flawed in reality and project it out there, that it has nothing to do with us, there's two kind of consequences. The first is a dissociation, which over time is a form of dis-ease, because we operate in an integrated ecology. We are so interconnected with our world that were it not for the trees breathing, you could be dead in a matter of minutes if you just held your nose and refused to receive the continual breath of that which is around us. So we are part of an ecology, and when we own that and respond accordingly as we get data in the surrounding environment, not only do we become more conscious of our own shadow, light and dark, but we also can lend our support. There are many of our problems and opportunities in the world that require a large amount of participation from a majority in order to form their best expression. And so when we deny and say, no, that's that other country, that's the other part of the world, that's my government, it's not me, we don't lend our support. Similarly, when we find someone in an extraordinary amount of pain in our cult, around us, etc., when we say, oh, that's their pain, has nothing to do with me, the odds of that pain clearing up as opposed to infecting other people is much lower. When we own the data that's coming towards us in our reality as our own and seek to take responsibility, to use our ability and willingness to respond, to lend support in areas that we can help, that we create a better reality. And so these are my values and goals as we move into this. And perhaps there's a goal of yours or a value of yours that is not expressed here and that you'd like to give voice to. Or perhaps one of these goals or values is something that you do not share. You don't have that goal of nonprofits behaving in public interest, or the idea that if there's a problem around us, that it will resolve faster if we participate and take ownership of it as opposed to project it out there. And that's also useful to be conscious of, because what we do, our various actions and inactions, reflect our values and goals as we put them together.